You are listening to the e-flux podcast.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the e-flux podcast. My name is Stephen Squibb. I'm one of the editors of e-flux Journal. What you're about to hear is a conversation between myself and McKenzie Wark, famed scholar of the Situationist International, theorist of video games, and pen pal of Kathy Acker. Ken wrote an essay for the 85th issue of e-flux Journal from October 2017 about his experience working with Tino Siegel, and you'll hear him discussing that with me in a moment. How are you doing, Ken?
Fine, thank you, Stephen.
Thank you so much for coming on our podcast.
A pleasure.
We want to talk to you about your recent essay, My Collectible Ass. Where did this essay come from? How did the idea get started for you?
It was a commission. I got asked to do something about collecting digital art, which is sort of a bit of an impossibility, as anybody knows who makes art that isn't actual things that collectors want to own. So I thought I would just sort of speculate a bit on what is it that collectors actually collect when they collect things, and the obvious answer is the physical thing. But physical things aren't actually worth anything unless they have provenance, unless there's some information about them. So the speculation was, could you just collect the information and not the thing? Because that seems to be the kind of ultimate destination of this. It'd be a hell of a lot more efficient too. You wouldn't have to store and move the damn stuff. So would there be a way to sort of subtract the object altogether and just collect the information? And then what would that look like as collecting?
And you've been thinking about the significance of information in the political economy for a while now. Can you talk to us about what this victorious class idea that you have?
What if this wasn't capitalism anymore, but something worse? So we didn't end up with like the third way post-industrial utopia or whatever. But what if? And remember, Marx said, all that is solid melts into air, all that is sacred is profaned. But the one thing nobody ever seems to want to give up on is the idea that capitalism is just eternal and goes on forever. Like only its appearances change. But what if it mutated into something else, and that other thing wasn't communism, but something worse? And what if this had to do, as Marx, very orthodox Marxists would say, it's the forces of production developed to the point where we commodified land, and then we commodified things with industrialization, and then we moved on to information. And is there a kind of a whole new political economy that's to do with the commodification of information? And does it generate new kinds of class relation between those who make it? And making information would be making novelty in a sense. Can you make some kind of new relationship between information? But then, as those of us who make it know, you don't own the means of its production and distribution and storage. You don't own the vector along which it moves. Somebody else does. So is there a way you can kind of command the whole economy now just by owning and controlling the means by which information moves? So I called that vectorless class. So there was a landlord class, then there was a capitalist class. There were already two ruling classes, right, based on commodifying something. What if there's a third? And what they commodified is information. And I don't just mean the obvious examples like Google or Facebook or whatever, but if you look at the Fortune 500 companies, like the top 50, a lot of them are actually in the information business. Like even the car companies are kind of really in the car loan business now. It just so happens they have more information about the car buying thing because that's what they also make. But they make their money out of the loans. And so the actual production of the thing becomes secondary. So to kind of think that sort of third order abstraction of the economy strikes me as the challenge of our times.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because, of course, Marx says that the difference between absolute and relative surplus value is in many ways dependent on the ability of a given capital to capture a certain piece of technology, and it's because no one actually owns an idea, and that's what makes it an idea, that capitals eventually have to compete by cutting their workers' wages. And so there's an immediate relationship in some ways, or at least Marx sees one, between exploitation and the impossibility of private informational property. How do you... Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, general intellect.
Yes, yeah.
And there's maybe something a little too idealist about that as a term, but sort of Marx was trying to think the commons of intellectual production as much as the commons of physical production. Like he was actually sort of grappling with thinking those two things, but maybe not quite realizing they could be separate. He'd already grasped the way profit's different from rent, and that there's a kind of he gets this from Ricardo, right? In Ricardo, it's all like the struggle of the capitalist class against the landlord class, like it's intra-ruling class struggle. What if there's another intra-ruling class struggle sort of going on now between those who manufacture things and those who want to own and control the information? But where, as you say, because of the collective nature of the production of intellect, there are all sorts of like workarounds. So we have increasingly strict intellectual property law to try and capture it, but it still keeps leaking out all over the place. And then you have the kind of evil genius of, well, how do you just, commodify the commons? You rely on the fact that it's, socially produced. It's Google, right? Remember we used to have the culture industries? At least they made stuff for us. Like Google doesn't make a damn thing. They just own the metadata about where it is. I call it the vulture industry, right? It just sort of like parasites on something else. Although, it was kind of genius to figure that out. We're all going to, share the information for free, but they all own and control where it is.
Yeah. And how does art, fit into these kinds of considerations? I mean, you're a theorist and a philosopher and one of the founding thinkers of media studies. When and how does art fit into your practice as a thinker and as a writer, as an education tool? Is it a sort of Heideggerian truth claim? Is it a sort of didactic political intervention? How do you use art in your own thinking and writing?
I still think, and I'm just an epiphany of media studies. Plato's already doing media studies. We're just like at a little.
That's true. That's true. That's true. The cave parable is a media
claim
studies.
there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then what was the second part of this? Was
just about how art, because here we are in this art space, in this art organization, and I don't identify as an artist. Maybe you do, but I think it's interesting. I'm always sort of wondering how it was that art found a space for these ideas that matter so much to us, and so I'm curious how you feel about art.
I identify as a bad artist. I just really suck at it. I have no collectors, no dealer. Like the work is terrible.
It's the best kind.
I think of it as an aesthetic practice, but I just have absolutely no talent with anything except sticking words together, and that's arguable as well. But I do think. As Ezra Pound said, artists are the antennae of the era, and that's sort of like a slightly technologically obsolete metaphor, which is actually maybe even appropriate now, in a way that artists sort of seize hold of these things, as McLuhan would say, when they cease to be the front line of technical change, then you get to play in the space, but you sort of figure out artists sort of explore the affordances of particular kinds of media. I actually think all art is about media, essentially. So to me, it's like I just find it interesting to look at what artists do and try to find those artists I can't describe yet. I'm kind of not interested in art that seems to illustrate things people say, but I'm sort of interested in those artworks where you just don't quite know what language would describe that, and then you sort of have to stretch a language to fit what it does. But I am sort of a little reductive about it. I want to see the art as kind of maybe sort of metonymic relationship, like a part of a whole, and then what's the whole it's a part of that we don't quite have a language for.
Yeah, and this actually is a nice transition back into where we started, which is with the work that gave rise to this question of collection or made this question of collection concrete for you. Can you talk a little bit about your experience in Tino's projects? Yeah,
I got asked to be an interpreter, I think was the term he was using, for work by Tino Segal at Marion Goodman Gallery. It was called This Situation, which involved learning a movement discipline, which I was terrible at, and also memorizing quotations. And it's like, I can't memorize a damn thing. I like figure out one every day. But they're all about the concept of situation. And I think Tino found me because I published a little bit on the Situations International already.
A little bit. Two books now? Three?
This was before I'd done those.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. I love your
Although, funny story about that, I told Tino before doing the second of the works he had me do, which was this Progress at the Guggenheim, that I was publishing a book called 50 Years of Recuperation of the Situations International, and Tino immediately said, "May there be 50 years more." And I said, "I love that. Like, that's
a great attitude.
Let's recuperate the hell out of this. We're not done with it." And it's like,
and keep recuperating.
Yeah, that's how that works. Like, you can't fight it. So Tino was interesting. Like, and the Marion Goodman one, there was only 6 of us in the room.
Yeah, can you explain for folks how the
so we had a movement discipline. We moved around the room and we did poses from classical paintings. No one need get that. And there was a sort of a protocol for how we would talk to each other and with the room, where someone would sort of like throw one of these quotes about situation and we would discuss it, and then you could rewind, change the topic, stop it. There were like little, sort of cues for how to sort of move things around. And the other rule was that we were not allowed to meta talk about it. We weren't allowed to talk about what we were doing. Like, that was a really only hard and fast thing. It's like, don't talk about the work.
Got to keep that fourth wall, man, Nothing more radical than a fourth wall.
We did it in the middle of, like, I don't know, like the Armory show or Gallery Week or something. So curators kept coming and they just wanted to, it was just crazy. But the kind of interesting part about this in relation to today's topic was Tino's work's not documented. Now, of course, there are photographs and things that people take, but they're not authorized, so they, in a sense, have no status in that sense. So the idea is that this stuff is never written down, it's never documented. If you want to purchase one, there's an oral agreement that you would be enabled to use the piece and so on. So he was kind of like, he studied both dance and economics, so he's kind of interested in the performative side, but also like what's value.
Yeah.
And the value was the situation. And he sort of thinks there is a kind of value in it. Like, it's not free. This is kind of the point of it. And there was something there you could turn into a commodity, even though it kind of barely exists at all, which I thought was a kind of interesting thing to pursue. So it was kind of like fun being in it and to kind of learn through doing, as we say, through being in this work.
Yeah. So how does he commodify these dance situations made of the most classically conservative art historical forms in the sense of the paintings, and then also, of course, the Kiss and Guggenheim. I'm joking, of course, but
you can sell them to institutional collectors, where the institution and this is a second-hand version, right? You have to talk to his dealer, or him personally, but you then get an oral contract to perform the protocol. And I believe there are some that are very, very small scale for private collectors. That secondhand.
Yeah.
And then I might as well tell the anecdote. I'm at the dinner at Marion Goodman's place in Central Park West, and it's kind of like, I don't belong here. I'm going to go like smoke cigarettes with the people who actually make the work, with his assistants, right? Because that's where you get the gossip. Yeah,
of course.
With like, smokers know what's going on, right? And the piece of gossip, and I can't say this is a fact, but it's a fantastic, sort of thought experiment. One of these works nearly went on the secondary market. So what does it mean to sell something that doesn't even exist, where you have only a kind of verbal contract that you own it, and you would then on-sell that, independent of the dealer and the artist? That struck me as kind of fascinating, that you could construct a completely kind of non-existent thing. It exists only as a piece of information that's then not even materially manifest except in the event of its sale and performance. So that struck me as kind of interesting, that you could sort of reduce it down kind of almost to nothing and still commodify it.
Yeah.
So information is kind of a thing in that sense. It's not nothing.
Yeah.
And there are ways to construct rarity out of it alone.
And what is just for the folks who might not know, why is the secondary market such a terrifying thing for artists?
Well, then you sort of have no control. And, sort of blue chip artists are kind of, and their dealers are very much about, controlling who owns it, with the idea that it goes into permanent collections that eventually end up in public collections and so on. So both a kind of reputation value is maintained, but also you keep control over the market value and of who has them and that sort of thing. So there's a sort of reluctance where dealers have any agency over this to sell to collectors who will let things get onto the secondary market. Because let's face it, like, the commercial art world is not really a market. Like, it seems less regulated than real estate in terms of, you can be a dealer on both the buying and selling side of the same contract in the art world. You can't even sell real estate like that, and real estate's pretty shonky, right? It's a kind of interesting, like free-for-all kind of world in that sense.
Yeah. No, one of the things, and we'll finish with your anecdote in a moment, but one of the things you do talk about in the essay is about the shift in collecting from an aristocratic model to a sort of industrial model to a, for lack of a better term, post-industrial or sort of information economy model. But there are times when I do wonder if art ever made it out of the aristocratic thing, because it is such a sort of weird or poorly functioning market mechanism, and that so if something gets to the secondary market, then it has a price, and that's what freaks everybody out, because if you have a publicly listed price for a work of art, then you can't pull someone aside in a back room and say, oh, this and that and the other thing, and this is the reason, and so you lose a whole bunch of control over your supply, which is totally understandable. If I was a dealer, that would freak me out too. I'm not criticizing, but it is interesting that the whole thing exists in a kind of tension to this idea of a publicly available piece of information about the price of a work of art. But anyway, so you're at this dinner, and there's this story about the secondary market, and then what happens?
Well, that's the end of the story. It's like, oh, that's kind of interesting anecdote, like that you could kind of create, value essentially out of nothing, and it could circulate of its own accord outside of the kind of dealer-collector relationship that would usually be private, right, where prices are not disclosed. You don't necessarily know who owns the things, at that point in time.
So Jerry was not at the... So when does Jerry Saltz...
Second, let's get the anecdotes out on the table.
Yeah.
Second anecdote. So when we were doing the Marion Goodman one, Jerry Saltz came quite frequently.
Jerry Saltz is the art critic for New York Magazine, for those of you who are not quite as New York-centric as
right, yeah. And a well-known critic at the time, and still, and he would come and try to rattle us, and Tino recruited us to basically talk to each other and to audiences in 4-hour shifts. So of course he got academics, because it's like we just we're like the athletes of this stuff.
Exactly.
We can just and also we can't be rattled, Jerry is trying to fire all these questions at us, And it was interesting. One thing about that work is people stayed a long time. People brought picnic lunches. It was just kind of unbelievable. There was something really interesting. You see people look at even really good work in galleries. They look at the work for 30 seconds, But people stayed, It was super weird. But it was Jerry camped out on the floor, trying to rattle us, So we kind of knew who we were at some point. And my partner, who was not in that show, is in works for another artist called Alex Pearlstein, who usually does video work. And anyway, so I was at an Alex Pearlstein show with my partner, and Jerry shows up, and Roberta Smith, who was the New York Times art critic at the time. And so I thought, well, I'll just try and persuade Jerry and Roberta that all of us who've been interpreters for Tino have his name tattooed on our asses, and that's part of the work. But I couldn't quite pull it off, and then I kind of got a little bit carried away because I'd had a couple of drinks, and I'm like, oh, and my partner Kristen has Alex's name tattooed on her ass, and this is now a thing in the, because there's a lot of art made out of humans, that's now a thing. But the signature of the artist on your ass is now what legitimates you as the artwork.
Yeah,
they didn't quite pull this off, but it just struck me as nice kind of thought experiment to then sort of embed the information back into the flesh. Would be kind of nice to kind of close the circle.
Yeah. So you're unable to sell your ass to Jerry Saltz, although perhaps there will be an opportunity in the future. Nothing is set in stone. But
Jerry, if you're listening,
please come on down to e-flux and pick up your purchase. So talk to us about these 3 stages of collecting and how you see art collecting evolving.
Yeah, and I think we're also doing this is a sort of slightly fictionalized and satirical account of these events. Of course. It's mostly true, right? Yeah. But I'm Australian. Good anecdotes should be improved a little bit. But I was just thinking, when you mentioned this earlier, there's a way in which aristocracies owned and collected artwork. There were aristocracies who then collected art. It now, in a sense, works the other way round. It's the collecting of art that makes you an aristocracy. Mm-hmm. It sort of becomes the gesture where you go from being merely a rich person to somebody who can participate. There are other things where you get to participate in this, one of which is being on the board of art institutions, right?
Yes.
And being on notable ones, or getting a New York co-op on a desirable street. You can't buy that for a love nor money. It takes reputation capital as well as the other kind. But art's one of those things, and it's where this sort of bizarre market where, blue chip dealers will just refuse to sell to you until you have convinced them that you're, an aristocrat in the making. So we kind of went full circle in a sense. But there's maybe 3 stages in which art, class, and commodity could be sort of thought. And there's a way in which the first version is, and this is very schematic, right? But the art of the ruling class of landed property is the kind of artisanal production thing that starts to separate itself out, and the name of the artisan is on it as the name of the artist, but usually the name of a workshop.
Right.
So, Rembrandt did not paint all of that Rembrandt. He did the face and the hands. Somebody else did the background. So there's not a sense that it's the work of an individual. Right. But it's in a world of craft production. It's separating out something from that world that has extra value on top of it. But then comes industrialization, capital's ruling class. Its fascination is with a different kind of special class of commodity. And it's the commodity that isn't always, first-rate craftsmanship, right? You look at a lot of modern art, you sort of think, there's something going on about this. It's like super interesting, but often the actual craftsmanship of making it is kind of like not all that. And this becomes a conserving thing too.
Right.
Like, some of these things it's not craft. It's, some sort of romantic expression of the genius of someone making a thing as unalienated labor. So that then becomes the thing, like Picasso kind of, drawing away in the studio and expressing his, sort of virile Spanish, persona.
Yes.
In a way that's not alienated labor. So it's the special class of the commodity is the unique singular thing produced by an individual. So, but maybe we now have a third. If we have a third ruling class, maybe there's a third kind of artwork. And the beginnings of it sort of are clearly in conceptual art. But maybe we went a lot further than that. And the ideal artwork now is not a craft artifact. It's not product of unalienated labor. It's a special class of financial instrument. And so there's something much more abstract about that. And so when you're looking at that work, it's still in its physically embodied form. You're sort of more looking at a contract on a wall.
Yeah.
Right? You're looking at something that's... And it's interesting that artist biographies have become kind of mundane now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it doesn't really matter. It's like, right, you went to art school at Columbia, and then you got a dealer. Like, fine, you don't have to be an outrageous, exciting persona to be collectible. There are some artists who are, but it's now strictly optional.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the way it kind of works has really got to do with the way the reputation of the artist circulates as information in particular worlds where its circulating adds value to that information. And then the physical work itself is just a derivative of that information circulating. And the person who figured that out, much more than conceptual art, is Warhol.
Yeah.
It's like you build the brand, like quite literally. And the works are simply derivatives of the circulation, exactly in the same way a financial instrument is.
Yeah.
So maybe that's where we ended up. It's like the third stage in the abstraction of the art commodity that maps onto the abstraction of commodity production.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. And if people want to hear more about it, they should read your essay in e-flux Journal.
Yeah, and which is in 2 parts. There's the little one, the collectible artist one, but it links to like an earlier piece, a little more conceptual, to sort of tease out those questions. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast. What are you looking forward to anything in the near future? We're living in such dark times. I'm trying to collect things people are excited about.
What am I excited about? Going home and playing with the cats.
There will still be cats.
There will still be cats.
After the apocalypse, there will still be cats. It's true. Good. Well, we'll end on that note, and hope to have you back again soon. And
thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you so much for listening to the e-flux podcast. If you want to read Ken's essay, My Collectible Ass, it's available online at e-flux.com under the e-flux Journal subheading, issue number 85, October 2017. Please do stay tuned for future episodes when we hope to discuss with Elizabeth Pavanelli the 4 fundamental axioms of contemporary critical theory.